You've been putting in countless hours, dealing with situations that seem to drain every ounce of energy from your body. You feel unappreciated, overworked, and maybe even disrespected. You can't take it anymore. Then, in one instant, in the middle of the office, you do something bold, something unimaginable. You quit. You stand up, say those powerful words, and walk out the door. But wait, that's not the end of the story. What if the very person you thought was the cause of your frustration, the CEO, suddenly stops you from leaving? What if they ask you to stay? What would that mean? Why would they even care? What happened in that moment when your decision was about to change everything? This is where the story takes an unexpected twist. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm so excited you're here today because this isn't just any ordinary story. This is a story that's about much more than just quitting a job or a CEO's plea for someone to stay. It's about choices, challenges, and the human experience of facing your limits. You're going to want to stick around because what happened next will leave you questioning your own actions in similar situations. Now, I know some of you watching might be in a job right now where you feel like you're stuck in a loop. Every day is just the same, and the feeling of being trapped starts to grow. You might even be thinking about quitting, but you don't know what would happen if you did. Some of you might even have experienced a situation where you walked away from something, only to have the very person you thought was the problem ask you to stay. It's an experience that feels surreal, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to our protagonist today, and I'm here to take you through every unexpected turn of this rollercoaster of a journey. But before we dive deeper into the story, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a position where you were pushed to the brink? You've been dealing with people who don't understand your worth or see the effort you put in, and one day, the frustration hits a peak. And just when you think you're at the end of your rope, something happens that makes you stop in your tracks. Maybe someone you least expected suddenly shows empathy, or you realize there's more to the situation than you originally thought. That moment of clarity, that turning point, changes everything. Stay with me, because I promise you, as we go deeper into this story, you're going to see the real power of human connection, of how sometimes, the people we least expect can have a completely different side to them. The CEO in this story wasn't just a boss. No, they were much more than that, someone who had been silently observing, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But what was their true intention? Why did they stop her from leaving? In the beginning, it might seem like a typical story of workplace frustration, a talented employee pushed to her limits. But as we peel back the layers, we uncover hidden motives, untold truths, and the power of decision-making. There's something deeper happening here, something that will make you reconsider how we view authority, leadership, and even our own worth in the workplace. This is not just about quitting, it's about the unexpected moments in life that force us to rethink everything we thought we knew. Now, I know you're probably sitting there, curious about what happened next, wondering why this CEO suddenly became the hero in a situation that seemed to be heading for disaster. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what comes next because the twist will leave you speechless. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you walk away or would you listen to the person who's now asking you to stay? What if the solution to your struggle wasn't what you thought it was? In a moment, we're going to dive into the details of the conversation that changed everything, but before we do, I want you to take a second to think about this. What is your breaking point? How far are you willing to go before you snap? And more importantly, if someone were to ask you to stay, would you give them the chance to explain, or would you just walk away, thinking you've had enough? The truth is, there's always more than meets the eye. No situation is as straightforward as it may seem on the surface. And as this story unfolds, you'll come to realize that sometimes the answers we're looking for are closer than we think, but it takes the right circumstances to see them clearly. Before we continue, I want to remind you to hit that like button if you're enjoying the video so far and subscribe if you want to hear more incredible stories just like this one. Trust me, this is one you won't forget. And if you've ever been on the edge of quitting or have ever had to make a decision that changed the course of your life, you're going to want to hear this story all the way through. So, are you ready to find out why the CEO asked her to stay? Are you ready to hear how one simple conversation turned everything around? Because the answer isn't what you think. You're about to discover what happens when your biggest frustration turns into your greatest opportunity. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. But don't go anywhere just yet, because in the next part, everything will be turned upside down. And you're going to want to see it all unfold. Trust me on this one. Let's rewind just a bit and take a closer look at the woman at the heart of this story, the one who found herself standing at the crossroads of a decision that would define her future. Her name was Jessica, and for the past 2 years, she had been a rising star at one of the most fast-paced, high-pressure companies in the tech world. On paper, Jessica had it all: intelligence, ambition, a sharp work ethic, and a reputation for delivering results when everyone else seemed to struggle. Her colleagues admired her drive, and the upper management had high hopes for her career. But somewhere along the way, things started to feel different. The once exhilarating challenges slowly morphed into burdens, the workplace that once felt like a second home became a place of dread, and the long hours that once brought satisfaction began to feel like a personal sacrifice. It wasn't just the work itself, it was the environment. You see, Jessica had been working directly under Trevor, a senior manager who was, by all accounts, a brilliant strategist. Trevor was the kind of guy who always seemed to know the right moves, the right tactics, but there was one thing that Jessica couldn't shake: he never seemed to care about how hard people worked. His focus was always on results, numbers, deadlines, but never on the people behind them. And Jessica, well, she was one of those people who always gave her best. She was the one staying late, juggling multiple projects, ensuring everything was flawless. She wasn't just doing it for herself, she was doing it for the team. But somewhere along the line, Trevor had made it clear that hard work didn't earn appreciation, only results did. His relentless demand for perfection, his complete lack of empathy, and the way he took credit for other people's ideas made Jessica question if her dedication even mattered. Still, she pushed on. She figured it was just part of the grind. But then things took a turn. It wasn't just Trevor anymore, it was the CEO, Catherine, who had started showing a more hands-on interest in her department. Catherine had always been somewhat of a mystery to the employees, rarely interacting directly with the lower ranks. She was known for being cool, collected, and incredibly sharp, traits that made her an effective leader but also distant. Yet, recently, Jessica had noticed Catherine's gaze linger a little too long whenever they passed in the hallways or at meetings. It was subtle, but Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was under a microscope, that her every move was being watched. It felt like she was constantly being evaluated, tested, as if her every decision was being scrutinized for reasons she couldn't understand. But what bothered her most wasn't the fact that Catherine seemed to be paying more attention, it was the way her expectations had suddenly changed. In the past month, the bar had been raised higher than Jessica could even reach. No matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. There was always something more, something she hadn't done yet, and Catherine's disappointment was written all over her face. But it wasn't just the pressure from above. There were whispers among her colleagues, too. The office culture had become more toxic, more competitive. Friends turned into rivals, and Jessica started to feel like she was competing against her own team rather than working alongside them. She couldn't tell who she could trust anymore. Was it Amanda, her longtime friend and teammate, who had recently started distancing herself after landing a new promotion? Or was it Tom, the quiet but ambitious analyst who'd been working closely with Trevor on several high-stakes projects? There were rumors about him making moves to get ahead, and Jessica had overheard a conversation where Trevor seemed to be hinting that Tom would be the next in line for a major role, a role that Jessica had been eyeing for herself. Could that have been the push that caused everything to implode? Then, just when it seemed like everything was unraveling, Jessica found herself in the middle of an email thread, a thread she wasn't supposed to see. It was a private conversation between Catherine and Trevor. The subject line was something about future leadership, but what caught her eye was a single sentence buried in the middle of the email: "We need someone who isn't afraid to make tough decisions, someone willing to go the distance. Jessica might be the one we need, but she's close to burning out. We'll need to keep an eye on her." At first, Jessica couldn't believe it. Her mind raced. Was Catherine concerned about her well-being, or was she just another name on a list of potential candidates to be used and discarded once she'd outlived her usefulness? The cryptic words made her question everything. Were they truly watching out for her, or was it all part of a bigger plan to manipulate the team into performing at any cost? The tension had become unbearable. Jessica felt trapped in a situation where the only thing she seemed to be good at was surviving, not thriving. She had given so much of herself, but no matter how much she sacrificed, it was never enough. And so, in one intense moment of clarity fueled by weeks of frustration, self-doubt, and the creeping feeling that no one had her back, she made the choice. She walked into the office, straight to her desk, and typed up her resignation letter. The decision felt final, almost liberating, as she pushed send. She was done. But then came the twist. As Jessica gathered her things, preparing to leave the office for good, something unexpected happened. Catherine appeared, standing at the entrance to her office, a look of concern on her face. It wasn't the cold, calculating gaze that Jessica had come to expect, it was something different. There was a vulnerability in Catherine's eyes, something she hadn't seen before. Without saying a word, Catherine closed the door behind her and gestured for Jessica to sit down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the air was thick, palpable. But then, Catherine did something completely unexpected. She asked Jessica to stay. No pleading, no promises of grand bonuses or promotions, just a simple request: I don't want you to go. Not yet. Let's talk about this. But why? Why would the CEO, someone who seemed to hold all the cards, someone who had kept her distance, suddenly care so much? What had changed? Was it really concern for Jessica's well-being, or was there something more at play? Why was Catherine, the one person who had been so hard to read, now asking for a conversation? Jessica didn't know, but she knew this conversation was about to change everything. The clock was ticking, and the decision she was about to make could lead to consequences she hadn't yet begun to fathom. And so, with one last breath, Jessica sat down, not knowing that this moment would lead her into a web of secrets and revelations that would force her to question everything she thought she knew about her job, her colleagues, and the person who now stood before her. The mystery was just beginning, and no one could have predicted where it would end. But one thing was for certain: nothing in this story was as it seemed as Jessica sat there, waiting for Catherine to speak. Her mind raced. What had changed? Why was the CEO suddenly so concerned? The room felt unusually quiet, and the air was thick with unspoken words. Catherine finally broke the silence, her voice steady, yet there was an underlying tension that Jessica couldn't quite place. I know things have been difficult for you lately, Catherine began. But you're too valuable to lose. You've been a key player here, and we're in the middle of something bigger than just day-to-day operations. I don't want you to walk away from it just yet. Please, let me explain. For a moment, Jessica felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Catherine had been misjudging her. Maybe she understood now. But then Catherine's next words twisted that hope into something darker. But I can't promise you everything will be easy. In fact, things are going to get a lot harder before they get better. If you stay, you need to understand there's more at play here. More than you think. The sudden shift in tone left Jessica feeling uneasy. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something wasn't right. She'd seen enough to know that people, especially CEOs, rarely made requests like this without a bigger agenda. Yet, she had little choice. The weight of her decision pressed on her like an anchor, and no matter how much she tried to read between the lines, she couldn't decipher Catherine's true intentions. Was this an opportunity, or was it a trap? As the conversation continued, Jessica tried to push her growing doubts aside. She couldn't let herself be distracted by the possibility of manipulation, not now. The real question was, what exactly was Catherine trying to pull her into? Was it about the future of the company, or was there something more personal at stake? Jessica decided to stay. She didn't make this decision lightly, but curiosity gnawed at her. She needed answers. She wanted to know what the real deal was with Catherine and the company, but little did she know, the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it would become. The very next day, after the conversation with Catherine, something strange happened. Jessica had received an anonymous email, a single line, with no subject, no signature: stop looking. You don't know what you're getting into. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could have sent this? Who knew she was digging into something that clearly wasn't meant for her to uncover? The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. Someone was watching her, and it wasn't just Catherine. Despite the warning, Jessica couldn't back down. If anything, the email only made her more determined to find out the truth. She began looking into the company's financial records, hoping to find any discrepancies, any hint that Catherine's sudden concern had a reason behind it. But then, just as she was about to crack open a folder with critical information, she arrived at her desk one morning to find it missing. The folder, the one she had spent hours poring over, was gone. Vanished without a trace. Someone had been in her office, someone who knew exactly what she was searching for. The more she tried to connect the dots, the more it seemed like something larger was at play. The stakes were rising. But what was the secret? What was the company hiding? Was it tied to Catherine, or did it have something to do with Trevor and his sudden, inexplicable coldness? The sudden disappearance of the file felt like a red flag. It was almost as if someone wanted her to stop, to back away from the investigation. But who could she trust? It was around this time that Jessica's old friend, Amanda, reached out to her, acting as though everything was normal. Amanda, who had been distant ever since her promotion, sent a casual text asking if they could grab lunch. On the surface, it seemed innocent, but something about the message felt off. The old Amanda never would have reached out in such a nonchalant way. Was she genuinely trying to reconnect, or was this just another way for someone to keep tabs on Jessica? Jessica agreed to meet Amanda, hoping it would provide some clarity, but the conversation felt forced. Amanda seemed overly eager to talk about everything except work, making small talk about personal life, reminiscing about old times, but every time Jessica tried to steer the conversation toward her recent concerns at the office, Amanda became strangely defensive. "You know how it is, Jess," Amanda said, sipping her coffee nervously. "Sometimes you just need to let things go. People move on, and the workplace is always going to change." There was an awkwardness in Amanda's voice that Jessica couldn't ignore. It was as if she was subtly warning her not to dig any deeper. Jessica pressed on, trying to piece things together. "I'm just worried, you know? Something doesn't feel right with Catherine. Or Trevor, for that matter. I can't shake the feeling that we're all being manipulated somehow." Amanda's expression shifted, and for a split second, Jessica saw a flash of unease. "You should be careful," Amanda muttered, almost under her breath. "Trust no one." Then, as quickly as it came, the tension passed, and Amanda laughed it off, suggesting they change the topic. Jessica's instincts were on high alert. Could Amanda be in on this? Was she part of something that Jessica didn't fully understand? Was she somehow connected to the missing file, or was her sudden coldness simply a result of her promotion? As the days passed, Jessica began to feel more isolated. The pieces weren't fitting together, and the more she uncovered, the more people seemed to close ranks around her. Every time she tried to dig a little deeper, another obstacle appeared. More files disappeared from her desk, more cryptic messages flooded her inbox. The warning signs were everywhere, but the more Jessica investigated, the more confusing everything became. And then one afternoon, as she was sifting through an old project report, a file caught her eye. It wasn't anything she had seen before, yet somehow, it looked familiar. As she opened the file, she froze. It contained a series of email exchanges between Catherine and someone else, someone she hadn't seen in months. Someone who had left the company years ago, David, her former colleague, a man whose departure had never been fully explained. The emails were dated just a few months before Jessica started working there, and they spoke of a partnership, one that Jessica had never heard about before. It was a deal, a venture that had fallen apart, but why was this being hidden now? Was there more to David's departure than everyone had led her to believe? Before Jessica could dig any deeper, the door to her office swung open. There, standing in the doorway, was none other than Trevor. His usual smug expression was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. "Jessica," he said in a low voice, "you need to stop digging. Trust me, you don't want to know where this leads." And just like that, the room seemed to close in on her. The warning was clear. But what was Trevor trying to protect? What was so dangerous about the truth? Jessica's heart raced. She had no choice now. The truth was out there, but it was slipping further from her grasp with every passing moment. And with Trevor's warning echoing in her mind, she realized one thing: this was far from over. The deeper she dug, the more she understood that uncovering the truth would come at a steep price. But now, there was no turning back. She had to know what Catherine, Trevor, and the company were hiding, even if it meant losing everything in the process. The puzzle pieces were starting to fall into place, but the biggest question of all remained: who was Jessica really up against? Jessica felt the weight of Trevor's words sink into her bones, but she didn't have the luxury of retreating. The door to her office slowly clicked shut behind him, but her mind raced with possibilities. What was he trying to protect? What did he know that she didn't? She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pushed into a corner, and the more she learned, the less she understood. But one thing was becoming clear: everyone around her was hiding something. It wasn't just Catherine, Trevor, or the missing files, it was everyone, even the people she once called friends. That night, as Jessica tried to piece together what she had just learned, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Amanda. "Can we talk?" it read. For a moment, Jessica hesitated. What could Amanda possibly want to say now? After their strange conversation earlier, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda was involved in something bigger than she had let on. Reluctantly, she agreed to meet. If anything, it might give her another piece to the puzzle, even if it meant risking her already fragile trust. They met at a small cafe a few blocks from the office, the kind of place where the noise of the world seemed to disappear the moment you walked in. Amanda was already there when Jessica arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her head down, as if trying to avoid the world. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. Jessica could tell something was wrong. As she slid into the seat across from her, Amanda looked up, her expression dark and filled with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. "You were right," Amanda whispered, her voice shaking. "There's more to this than we thought." Jessica leaned in, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Amanda glanced around nervously, ensuring no one was listening. Then, in a low voice, she said, "Someone came to see me yesterday. Someone who warned me to stop talking to you. They said if I didn't back off, things would get ugly." Jessica's stomach dropped. Who would threaten Amanda? And why? Was it just a coincidence that these threats seemed to be escalating as she got closer to the truth? Amanda paused, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know who they were, Jess. But they knew everything. They knew about our conversation. They knew about the emails you found. They knew that you've been digging into things that, well, things that people want to stay buried. I'm scared." Jessica's mind was reeling. Someone was trying to silence her, but now it seemed like Amanda had become a target, too. The pieces were slipping further out of her grasp, and the more she tried to make sense of the situation, the more questions piled up. If Amanda was involved in this somehow, what did that mean? Was she a pawn in someone else's game, or was she playing a role in this dangerous game herself? "I don't know what's going on, Jess. I swear to you, I don't," Amanda continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "But I think it's bigger than just us. I think it goes back to something from before, something no one wants to talk about." "Before?" Jessica repeated, trying to keep her composure. "What are you talking about?" Amanda shook her head, as if she was struggling to find the right words. "You remember David, right? The one who left a few years ago? Well, I found something. A document, something he wrote before he left. I think it might be connected to all of this. I've been trying to find it for days, but," she trailed off, looking down at her hands, clearly uneasy. "Where is it?" Jessica asked, leaning forward. Her heart pounded with anticipation. Could this be the breakthrough she was looking for? "I don't have it anymore," Amanda whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was taken. Someone got to it before I could even make a copy. I don't know who, but they knew I was looking for it." Jessica's mind spun. What was it about David's document that was so important? And why was Amanda suddenly so fearful? The more she dug, the more it seemed like everyone around her was involved in this twisted web of secrets, lies, and betrayals. But now, even Amanda, someone Jessica had trusted, seemed to be hiding something. "I have to find out what's going on," Jessica said, more to herself than to Amanda. But before Amanda could respond, a figure entered the cafe, a tall man in a dark suit. He scanned the room quickly, his gaze settling on their table. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. Something about him felt off. He looked like he belonged in the shadows, like he had been following them for days. Amanda's face went pale, and her hand shot out, grabbing Jessica's wrist. "We need to go," she hissed under her breath, her voice full of panic. Jessica's mind raced. Who was this man? And why was Amanda so frightened? Without another word, they both stood up and rushed toward the door. But as they stepped outside, the man followed them, his footsteps deliberate and fast. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. What had they gotten themselves into? They ducked into an alley, the sound of the man's footsteps growing louder behind them. Jessica turned to Amanda, her voice shaky. "Who is he? What does he want?" "I don't know," Amanda whispered, her face ashen. "But I think it's time we stop asking questions." As they ran through the winding streets, Jessica felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They were in deeper than she had ever realized. The clues were there, but they were slipping away just as quickly as they appeared. The document, David, the cryptic warnings, the missing files, all of it was connected. But how? Who could be trusted? And who was orchestrating this game, pulling strings from the shadows? The man's pursuit continued, but just as they turned a corner, he disappeared. Jessica glanced over her shoulder, trying to catch a glimpse of him, but there was no sign. The eerie silence that followed felt like a warning in itself. She and Amanda slowed their pace, gasping for air, but neither of them spoke. Something had changed in the air. The tension was palpable. Jessica knew one thing for sure now: the truth was within reach, but so was the danger. The stakes had risen higher than she could have imagined, and every step she took seemed to lead her deeper into a labyrinth of lies, betrayal, and secrets. She had no choice now but to keep moving forward, even if it meant risking everything. The game was no longer just about uncovering the truth, it was about surviving it. But as she turned to look at Amanda, she realized that the stakes had become even more personal. Amanda had been swept up in this mess, too, and now, Jessica wasn't sure if she could trust her anymore. The web was tightening, and there was no telling who would be caught in the end. And as Jessica looked down at her phone, another message appeared, this time, from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. This is your final warning." The chase was far from over. The night air was unusually heavy, thick with the promise of something ominous as Jessica walked along the darkened streets. Amanda was by her side, though her nervous glances and the way she clutched her phone told Jessica she was just as unsettled. They'd made it home safely after the terrifying chase, but the adrenaline was still coursing through Jessica's veins. It was hard to shake the feeling that someone was watching them, even though the streets appeared empty, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. Every shadow seemed to shift, every car that passed felt like it was lingering just a little too long. Jessica kept glancing over her shoulder, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, she couldn't ignore the sense of dread that had settled deep in her chest. There was something about the way the man in the suit had followed them earlier, something about the calm way he'd pursued them, as if he knew exactly where they would go, exactly how to corner them, that kept her on edge. It wasn't just paranoia, it was a feeling that something was coming. And when it came, it would hit hard. Amanda seemed on edge, too, but she wasn't saying much. It was as if whatever they'd learned today had finally caught up with her, and the silence between them was becoming suffocating. Jessica wanted to ask her what she knew, wanted to push her for answers. But she was terrified of the answer she might get. What if Amanda had been lying? What if she was somehow involved in all of this? The truth was, Jessica didn't know who she could trust anymore. The sound of her phone vibrating in her pocket interrupted the suffocating quiet. She pulled it out, expecting another cryptic message, another warning, but what she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't a message, it was a photo. A picture of her apartment building, taken from a distance. The image was blurry, the lighting off, but it was unmistakable. The photo had been taken within the last few minutes. Jessica felt a cold sweat break out along her spine. Her mind raced. Who could have been watching her? How long had they been there? The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Without thinking, she grabbed Amanda's arm, pulling her to a stop. "Amanda," Jessica whispered, her voice low but filled with panic. "Someone's watching us. I don't know how, but they're following us." Amanda looked at her, the fear in her eyes unmistakable. What do? We can't. Before she could finish, the sound of footsteps behind them made both of them freeze. Slow, deliberate steps. Too slow to be anyone just out for a casual stroll. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was, she could feel the presence, the weight of someone tailing them just out of sight. Amanda, we need to go now, Jessica said, her voice low and urgent. She didn't care if it made her seem paranoid. She didn't care if Amanda thought she was losing it. She knew they were being hunted. They took off running, not looking back, just pushing forward through the streets. The rush of their footsteps against the pavement was the only sound that filled Jessica's ears. But even as they ran, she knew it was futile. Whoever was following them was too close. Too precise. Whoever it was had been doing this for a while. Amanda was panting beside her, but she wasn't complaining. There was no time to talk, no time to reason. As they neared a corner, Jessica's phone buzzed again. Another message. You're not running fast enough. The text sent a jolt of fear through Jessica's body, and her thoughts began to spin. Was it someone from the office? Had Trevor sent someone after her? No, this felt more personal, more calculated. It was almost like someone had been watching her life unfold, like they knew her every move, every hesitation. They reached the next block, but the streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, jagged shadows on the sidewalk. As Jessica looked ahead, her heart stopped. Her apartment building loomed in the distance, but it wasn't just the building that caught her attention, it was the car parked across the street, just outside her building's entrance. It wasn't the usual cars she'd seen parked there. It was a black sedan, its windows tinted. The same kind of car she'd seen earlier in the day when the man in the suit had followed them. Amanda stopped beside her, her chest heaving. Jessica, we have to go inside. We have to. No, Jessica cut her off, grabbing her arm. No. We're not going in there. Not yet. Someone's waiting for us. Amanda's face twisted in confusion. But what do we do? Before Jessica could answer, the sound of footsteps behind them grew louder. Closer. Too close. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow shift. A figure moving rapidly toward them. Amanda, run! Jessica screamed. Without thinking, she pushed Amanda in the direction of an alleyway, just out of the line of sight of the car. They sprinted down the narrow passage, heartbeats racing in unison. Jessica's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind frantically trying to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. How had it come to this? Who had gotten so close to her life? They turned another corner, hoping to lose the figure following them, but when Jessica glanced back over her shoulder, her blood froze again. The man in the suit wasn't far behind. His silhouette was unmistakable. He was chasing them now. In the chaos of running, something didn't feel right. Her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, not caring that she was still running. I see you. She didn't know how, but the man in the suit was watching them, tracking them as they made their way through the streets. Jessica's stomach twisted with dread. Was he really that close, or was someone else pulling the strings? She didn't have time to think about it. Suddenly, Amanda stumbled, falling hard to the ground, scraping her palms against the rough pavement. Jessica immediately skidded to a halt, looking back, but when she reached out to help her, Amanda looked up, eyes wide with terror. I can't keep running. I can't. It's too much, Jess. Jessica's heart hammered in her chest. She knew they were out of time. She knew they couldn't keep running forever. The decision hit her like a cold wave of realization. Amanda was right. They couldn't outrun this. Whoever was following them wasn't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Until they had her. Amanda, listen to me, Jessica said, her voice shaking but determined. We need to go back to the office. It's the only way we're going to get any answers. But as soon as the words left her mouth, the phone buzzed again. One final message. It was the last thing Jessica ever expected to read. It's too late for that. You're already too far in. You should have walked away when you had the chance. The phone slipped from Jessica's hand, crashing to the ground as a chill of fear settled in her bones. They were already too far in. The danger wasn't just real, it was closing in on them from every angle. And it was about to become far worse than either of them could have imagined. Because in that moment, Jessica knew one thing for sure, there was no turning back now. Just as Jessica and Amanda stood there, frozen in the alley, the weight of their situation settling heavily around them, a new voice cut through the thick silence. It wasn't the man in the suit. It wasn't anyone from their past, someone they expected to see. It came from behind them, a familiar voice that made Jessica's blood run cold. Are you two really this paranoid, or have you actually lost your minds? Jessica whipped around, her heart pounding in her chest, her pulse in her ears. Standing in the shadows, her expression unreadable, was none other than Trevor. The man she had trusted, her boss, her confidant. The one who had seemed so earnest, so sincere when they'd spoken just hours ago. But now, seeing him there, the pieces began to click together in a way that sent a shiver down her spine. How had he found them? How had he known where to be at the exact moment they were trying to escape? It didn't make sense. Amanda, Jessica started, her voice trailing off in disbelief. Trevor stepped forward, his face calm, almost too calm. I warned you not to dig any deeper, didn't I? His voice was cold, and it was like a switch had been flipped. The man who had once been a mentor now stood before her like a stranger, like someone entirely different. Amanda, still on the ground, looked between the two of them, confusion clouding her features. She slowly stood up, dusting off her clothes, but her eyes betrayed something darker, something Jessica hadn't noticed before. She was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. No, it was something else. Jessica's gaze flicked to her, a sick realization creeping up her spine. Amanda wasn't just scared. She was in on it. Trevor's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched Jessica put the pieces together. It's really too bad you didn't listen, Jessica. But I suppose this is the way it had to happen. Amanda took a step forward, her voice suddenly sharper than Jessica had ever heard it before. You should have stayed out of it. This was never supposed to involve you. Jessica's mind was reeling. She couldn't process what was happening. Amanda. Trevor. How had it all gone so wrong? What are you talking about? What do you mean, it had to happen? She demanded, her voice growing more frantic with every passing second. Why are you doing this? What is going on? Trevor let out a sigh, as if he were explaining something simple to a child, something Jessica should have already known. You really have no idea, do you? This whole time, you've been chasing a ghost. The documents, the threats, the missing files, they were never the problem. You were. You've been in the way from the start, Jessica. Amanda stepped closer to Trevor, her gaze now steady, her previous anxiety all but gone. I tried to warn you, Jess. I did everything I could, but you never listened. You thought you were digging for truth, but all you were doing was digging your own grave. Jessica's mouth went dry. The words barely made sense. What? No. You're lying. This doesn't make sense. But deep down, she could feel it. She could feel the betrayal hanging in the air like smoke. Trevor smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile, it was calculated, sharp. You remember that document you were looking for? The one you thought David left behind? Jessica's breath hitched. What do you know about that? Trevor's eyes gleamed with something dark, something triumphant. Oh, I know all about it. And that's where it all comes together. The document was never about what you thought. It was never meant to be uncovered by anyone, especially not by you. But you, Jessica, you had to go poking around, didn't you? You made it your mission to find the answers, and now we're at the end of the road. All that's left is for you to let it go. Jessica's chest tightened. I'm not going to let you do this, she said, though her voice lacked the conviction it once had. She could feel the weight of his words, the suffocating reality that she'd been used, manipulated. I don't care what this is about. I'll expose everything, all of it. Trevor shook his head slowly. It's too late for that, Jessica. You see, the game was never about exposing the truth. It was about control. Power. And you were the perfect pawn. The ground beneath Jessica's feet seemed to shift, and the pieces of the puzzle that had seemed so clear now felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. What had she been chasing all this time? The document, the missing files, the mysterious threats, it had all led her here, but none of it had been what she thought it was. The truth had been hidden in plain sight, and now she was on the other side of it, lost and alone. Amanda stepped forward, her hand brushing against Trevor's arm in a way that almost seemed possessive. You were never supposed to uncover this. You were never supposed to be the one who found out what was really going on. And now, you're part of the mess we've created. Jessica's stomach churned. The realization was like a gut punch. This was all a setup, she whispered, but her voice felt small. From the start. From the moment I started working there. Trevor's smile widened, and for the first time, Jessica saw a flicker of the man who had been her mentor, a man she had trusted. Not quite, he said, his voice cold. You were never meant to find out what you did. But now, it's too late. The system we've built is unbreakable. And you're a liability. Jessica's hands trembled as she tried to piece together what he was saying. The walls were closing in, and everything she thought she knew was unraveling before her eyes. Trevor hadn't been trying to protect her. Amanda hadn't been a victim. No. She had been an accomplice from the very beginning. She was part of the lie, part of the game. Everything, the threats, the chase, the mysterious messages, it had all been orchestrated to lead her right here, to this moment. The sound of footsteps in the distance pulled her from her spiraling thoughts, but it didn't matter. It didn't change what was happening. Trevor and Amanda were playing a game she didn't even understand, and they'd manipulated her every step of the way. As the realization hit her, the floor beneath her feet seemed to disappear. She was drowning in this tangled web, and the more she struggled, the tighter it pulled. We'll give you one last chance, Trevor said, his voice low and dangerous. Walk away, Jessica. Forget everything you've seen. Forget us. Because if you don't, there's no coming back. Amanda's eyes locked with Jessica's, and for a fleeting moment, Jessica could have sworn there was a flicker of something, guilt. But then it was gone, replaced with cold indifference. The world around her seemed to blur as Jessica stood there, heart racing, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. How had she missed this? How had she trusted them both so completely? But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that everything had just changed, and the truth was far darker than she could have ever imagined. And the worst part? She didn't know if she could ever escape it. The air around Jessica was thick with tension as Trevor and Amanda stood before her, their faces like masks, cold and unreadable. The enormity of the situation weighed heavily on her chest, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. She could hear her pulse in her ears, could feel the desperate urge to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere left to hide. The walls were closing in around her, not just physically but emotionally. Every fiber of her being screamed to get out, to distance herself from the betrayal and manipulation that had just been laid bare. But she couldn't. Because the truth was, there was one thing left. One last thing that might set her free or destroy everything she had left. Trevor was watching her closely, his eyes gleaming with that same unsettling calm. It was as if he knew exactly what she was thinking, knew how badly she wanted to break, to collapse under the weight of the realization that she had been played from the beginning. He could see it in her eyes. He could see the hesitation, the fear, and perhaps, just maybe, he saw a flicker of hope that Jessica would still find some way to claw her way out of this. But Trevor didn't think she would. He knew better. He had already won. Amanda, take a step back, Trevor said, his voice calm but forceful. Amanda didn't protest, but the flicker of hesitation in her eyes as she moved aside didn't escape Jessica. It was a small thing, an almost imperceptible shift in her posture, but it told Jessica everything she needed to know. Amanda wasn't entirely sure about this either. Jessica swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising tide of panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She looked between Trevor and Amanda, her mind racing. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it now. But it was as if every path ahead of her led to a dead end. If she chose safety, if she let Trevor and Amanda win, she would lose everything, her career, her integrity, the trust she had once had in the people closest to her. If she chose the truth, she would be walking into a storm. One she wasn't sure she could survive. For a moment, the air around her seemed to freeze. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill, the quiet of the alley heavy with the weight of her indecision. But then Trevor spoke again, and his words hit Jessica like a freight train, knocking all her thoughts aside. You have one last choice, Jessica. Walk away. Leave it all behind, and we'll make sure you're safe. We'll make sure nothing happens to you. We'll give you your life back. No more secrets, no more danger. It'll be like it never happened. His words were smooth, like honey, sweet and tempting. They wrapped around her like chains, promising relief, safety, a return to normalcy. And the worst part was that part of her wanted to take it. She was exhausted. She was scared. She had been running on fumes for days now, her mind a blur of confusion and betrayal. The idea of walking away from all of this, of pretending it never happened, felt almost like a salvation. A way out. But Jessica knew better than to believe that. Nothing was ever that simple. Nothing had ever been that simple. No, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. I'm not going to walk away. You think I'm going to just let you win like that? Trevor's smile faltered, just for a split second, but Jessica saw it. She saw the flash of anger behind his calm demeanor, the crack in his mask. He had been prepared for her to resist, but the rawness in her defiance surprised him. He had thought she'd be broken by now, that she would crumble under the weight of the lies. You're making a mistake, Trevor warned, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm offering you a way out, and you're throwing it away. The tension was unbearable now. Jessica's mind was spinning, the choices stretching out before her like a maze, each path leading to an uncertain future. What would happen if she walked away? Would she be safe? Would she be free from the constant fear, the constant threat hanging over her head? But then, what kind of person would she be if she let them get away with this? What would she be sacrificing if she let them control her life? She looked at Amanda, hoping, desperately hoping, for some sign that her friend wasn't as involved as she seemed, that there was some way out of this. But Amanda's face was unreadable, her eyes distant. There was no help there. No salvation. Just silence. Do you really think it's worth it? Trevor continued, his voice softer now, almost coaxing. You can't win this. You can't expose us. You'll lose everything. Your career. Your reputation. And worst of all, the people you care about, they'll be dragged down with you. Jessica's stomach twisted painfully at his words. She had to make a choice. She couldn't keep running. She couldn't keep hiding from the truth. But at what cost? What do you want from me? Jessica finally demanded, her voice breaking. The weight of her situation was finally crashing down on her. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Trevor's gaze turned cold, and for the first time, there was no trace of warmth or manipulation in his expression. He wasn't offering her an out anymore, he was giving her an ultimatum. A decision that would determine her fate, and possibly the fate of everyone she loved. You have two choices, Jessica, Trevor said, his voice final, like a judge passing sentence. You can walk away. You can accept that you'll never be the same person you were before all of this. You'll live the rest of your life under our protection, in the shadows, pretending you never found out what's really going on. Or, you can keep digging. You can expose everything, but you'll lose everything. And I mean everything. You won't just lose your job, Jessica. You'll lose your friends. You'll lose your freedom. And if you're not careful, you could lose your life. The gravity of his words hit Jessica like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just talking about her career. He wasn't just talking about her future. He was talking about her very survival. He was giving her an impossible choice: stay quiet and be safe, or expose the truth and risk losing it all, including her life. Jessica's mind raced, but the more she thought, the clearer it became: she couldn't stay silent. She couldn't let them win. No matter the cost. No matter the risk. She had to uncover the truth. But as she steeled herself for the battle ahead, a small voice inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready for the consequences of that choice. She wasn't ready for what might come next. And as she looked at Trevor and Amanda, their cold, calculating eyes watching her every move, she realized something else: she was already trapped, whether she liked it or not. The moment she chose the truth, everything would change. The question was, would she survive it? Would anyone? The tension was unbearable now, and Jessica realized, for the first time, that the path to the truth was not just dangerous, it was deadly. Jessica's heart was pounding in her chest, each beat like a ticking clock, counting down to the moment she'd either crack under pressure or be swallowed whole by the storm that had descended on her life. The streets around her felt too quiet, too still, as if everything had frozen in place, waiting for the inevitable to happen. Trevor and Amanda stood in front of her like two towering figures, their smug expressions now fully unreadable. But Jessica wasn't looking at them anymore. She wasn't even sure she cared what they had to say. She was trying to grasp something bigger, something that felt just beyond her reach, like a shadow that kept slipping away every time she tried to touch it. The truth was much darker than she had ever imagined, and the weight of it was choking her. "Do you get it now, Jessica?" Trevor's voice was a low, almost mocking whisper, his eyes gleaming with a sense of finality that unsettled her more than she'd ever want to admit. "This isn't just about you. It never was." Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the fractured puzzle that had consumed her every thought for weeks. It never was. The words echoed in her mind. She'd been so focused on unraveling the truth about the company, about the lies and the manipulations that had poisoned everything she thought she knew. She had trusted people, trusted them with her career, her life, her beliefs. But now, as everything began to implode around her, she saw the shape of the conspiracy for what it truly was. It wasn't just one isolated event. It wasn't just a couple of crooked executives pulling strings from the shadows. No, this went far deeper. Jessica's chest tightened as realization hit her with a force that nearly knocked the wind out of her. The corruption she had stumbled upon wasn't just happening at the corporate level, it had infected every layer of the system she had once believed in. The people at the top, the people she had seen as allies, the ones who had claimed to be on her side, were all part of a much larger, far more dangerous game than she had ever anticipated. She had been blind to it all, the entire time, and the betrayal ran deeper than just Trevor and Amanda. It was in every handshake, every email, every seemingly innocent conversation. And as she pieced it together in her head, her stomach turned at the realization that she wasn't even the target, she was just an unwitting pawn in a game that had been played long before she ever showed up. Before she could say anything, a cold voice from behind her made her freeze. "You've been asking the wrong questions, Jessica. You think this is about you. But it's not. You're a distraction." Jessica's blood ran cold as she turned to see Sarah, her best friend, stepping out from the shadows, her face a mask of calm detachment. The woman she had trusted more than anyone else was now standing beside Trevor, her eyes betraying nothing but a cold, calculating hardness. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Jessica's voice cracked as she spoke, disbelief mingling with the rising tide of fear that gripped her chest. "How could you? After everything?" Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "I didn't have a choice, Jess. You were too close. You were digging too deep. And in case you didn't notice, you're way out of your league. This is bigger than just corporate espionage or some crooked CEO. It's about power, control, and keeping the wheels of a machine running that you don't even understand yet." The words hit Jessica like a slap in the face. She was still reeling from the shock of Sarah's betrayal, unable to process the weight of her former friend's involvement in this conspiracy. She had trusted Sarah. She had shared everything with her, poured her heart out about the fear and uncertainty gnawing at her. And now Sarah, the one person she had thought might still be on her side, had been playing her all along. "Sarah, no." Jessica couldn't hide the hurt, the sense of utter devastation in her voice. "This isn't you. You can't be part of this. You're telling me you've been lying this whole time?" Sarah's eyes flickered with something that almost looked like regret. Almost. But it was gone before Jessica could fully process it. "I didn't want this either. But some choices aren't ours to make. I was given orders. You don't get it, Jess. The people behind all of this, they own everything. Every part of your life, every decision you've made, every person you've trusted. They control it all." The implications of her words hit Jessica like a punch to the gut. They controlled everything? Jessica had thought the conspiracy was confined to a few powerful figures, but Sarah's confession made it clear that the situation was far more expansive. The entire system was rigged, every corporate deal, every political move, every law that had been passed in recent years, it all tied back to one central, hidden organization. People she had known, people she had respected, were all puppets in a grand scheme she couldn't even begin to understand. Sarah, please, just tell me who's behind this. Who's pulling the strings? Jessica's voice was raw, desperate, as if hearing the truth might finally untangle the web she had been caught in. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting between Jessica and Trevor, before she stepped closer, lowering her voice. I can't say their names, Jess. It's too dangerous. But I'll give you this, look around. The people you think are innocent. The ones who have been helping you. They're all in on it. Your CEO, the ones you've been getting close to. They were always part of this. And you were never meant to uncover the truth. You were just a tool. An inconvenient one now, but still a tool. They never thought you'd get this far. Jessica's world started to collapse around her. She felt sick, the room spinning as she tried to process everything Sarah had just told her. This was bigger than she could handle. Bigger than any one person could ever hope to bring down. She wasn't just up against a few corrupt individuals, she was up against a system so massive, so entrenched, that taking it down might not just be impossible, it might be fatal. Trevor's voice cut through the chaos in her mind. You've made your choice, Jessica. And you're still standing here, trying to figure out how to play the game. But the truth is, you've already lost. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the alleyway. Jessica turned, her heart leaping in her chest as a dark SUV pulled up to the curb. The doors opened, and a group of men in suits, faces hidden behind dark sunglasses, stepped out. Each one of them exuded an air of cold authority, the kind of men who were never afraid to do what needed to be done. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as one of the men stepped forward, his eyes locking onto hers with a chilling intensity. Time's up, he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. We've given you enough chances to walk away. Now, you've crossed a line. She was surrounded. Completely outnumbered, outclassed, and out of options. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting, how much longer she could keep running before they closed in for good. The truth was suffocating her, the conspiracy so vast that it felt like the very ground beneath her was crumbling away. She had gone too deep, exposed too much, and now there was no way out. But as the cold grip of panic began to take hold, something in Jessica clicked. Maybe she had lost this battle, but the war wasn't over. Maybe she didn't have all the answers. Maybe she didn't have a plan. But she couldn't stop now. She wouldn't. The stakes were higher than ever, and she wasn't backing down. Not without a fight. Jessica's breath came in ragged gasps as she stood facing the group of men, their cold eyes trained on her with an almost predatory focus. The world around her had narrowed down to this single moment, this brutal confrontation where everything she had fought for, everything she had uncovered, was about to collide with the harsh truth she had been trying to avoid. The SUV still loomed in the background, its dark silhouette ominous against the dim lights of the alleyway. The tension was suffocating, the air thick with the weight of impending disaster. Her heart raced, a cacophony of panic and determination reverberating through her chest. She had gone too far now. There was no retreat. No escape. She could only move forward. Are you really that naive? One of the men asked, his voice low, chilling, as though the words were just another piece of the puzzle that Jessica had failed to see. You think you can outsmart us? You think you can dig deep enough to expose the truth? You've played the part, Jessica. But you're not in control anymore. You never were. Jessica's hands trembled, but she fought to steady herself. She couldn't let them see the fear. Not now. She had come this far, and if this was the end, she would face it on her terms. She had uncovered enough, and it was time for the final confrontation, the final unraveling of the web they had so carefully woven around her. I'm not done yet, Jessica shot back, her voice steady despite the rising wave of dread crashing inside her. You think I'm a pawn? You think you've played me? I know the truth now. I know everything. The man in front of her, the leader of the group, smiled thinly. There was no warmth in his expression, just the cold certainty of someone who had already won. You think you know the truth? You think you've uncovered something no one else has? You haven't even scratched the surface, Jessica. You never stood a chance. But Jessica wasn't listening to him anymore. Her mind was running through everything she had uncovered, the hidden files, the strange phone calls, the meetings she had intercepted in the dead of night. The answers had always been right in front of her, but the pieces hadn't fit together until now. Sarah's warning, the coldness in Trevor's eyes, the lies that had dripped from Amanda's mouth, it had all been part of the same twisted game. It wasn't just the company. It was bigger than that. This wasn't about power. This was about control. And it ran deeper than corporate greed or political manipulation. This was about something more insidious. Something dangerous. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Jessica's mind sharpened, the fog of uncertainty lifting. She realized, with sickening clarity, that the conspiracy wasn't just about business, it was about influence. They weren't just operating in the shadows of the corporate world, they were embedded in the very fabric of society, pulling strings in politics, law enforcement, and even the media. The people she thought she could trust, the very people who had helped her along the way, had all been part of the same network. She was standing at the crossroads of a power struggle that had been carefully orchestrated for decades, and she had been nothing more than a pawn to them all along. She couldn't stop now. The stakes were too high. And she wasn't going to let them win. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Jessica lunged forward, grabbing the briefcase that one of the men was holding, the weight of it almost unbearable in her hands. She threw it to the ground, the metal locking mechanism breaking open with a loud crash. Papers spilled out, some shredded, others intact. Jessica's eyes quickly scanned the documents, her pulse racing. These weren't just corporate memos. These were government contacts. Private meetings. A detailed map of influence, spanning from local officials to global corporations. And the most shocking part. Her name was right there, in bold letters, across several pages. She turned to the man who had been speaking, her voice cold as ice. You never thought I'd figure it out, did you? You thought I was just a small-time reporter, someone you could control. But this isn't about just the company, is it? It's about everything. The man's expression shifted, just slightly. It was brief, but enough for Jessica to know she had struck a nerve. He took a slow step forward, his voice dripping with disdain. You still don't get it, do you? This has never been about control. It's about survival. The system we've built, it's the only thing keeping this world from descending into chaos. And you're a threat to it. A threat to everything we've worked for. The words sent a chill down Jessica's spine. Survival. He was right. The conspiracy was far more than a greedy power grab, it was about maintaining a certain order. A system that they would go to any lengths to protect. And she had stumbled into it, unknowingly, tearing down the walls that kept it hidden. She had become a liability. But now, with the evidence right in front of her, Jessica saw a way out. With one swift motion, Jessica grabbed the flash drive she had taken from Amanda's desk weeks ago, the key to everything she had uncovered. She inserted it into her phone and waited, her heart pounding as the files began to download. The footage, the communications, the records, they were all here. Everything she needed to expose them, to bring this entire operation to its knees. But just as she was about to press send, a hand grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. Jessica gasped, twisting to find Sarah standing there, her eyes full of regret, but also determination. The truth was in her eyes now, and it cut deeper than any betrayal. You can't do this, Jessica, Sarah said, her voice shaking. You don't understand what you're getting into. You have no idea how far they'll go to protect themselves. You're too late. Jessica's grip on the phone tightened. I'm already in this, Sarah. There's no going back. A long silence passed between them, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice softer, almost broken. I never wanted you involved. You're right. But now it's too late. They'll come for you. They'll come for all of us. Just as the words left her mouth, the doors of the alleyway slammed open, and more men poured into the space, weapons drawn. Jessica felt a cold sweat break out on her skin. They were closing in. There was no escape now. In that split second, everything seemed to slow down. Jessica's mind raced, But she knew there was only one thing she could do. She had to get the evidence out now. The stakes had never been higher, and in that fleeting moment, she realized that this wasn't just about her career or her safety, it was about something much bigger. Something that affected everyone. The conspiracy wasn't just about those at the top. It was about a corrupt system, a system that used people like Jessica as tools, as pawns in a game they would never win. She pressed send. And in that moment, as the files transferred, she realized she had just crossed a line. There was no going back. The truth was out there now, and nothing would ever be the same. But just as Jessica exhaled, a voice came from behind her, sharp, cold, and all too familiar. "You think this is over?" Trevor's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "You think you've won?" And then, in the final twist, the lights flickered, and the phone in Jessica's hand went dead. Everything went black. And Jessica knew, deep down, that the battle for the truth had only just begun when the lights flickered back on. Jessica found herself alone in the alley, her body trembling with exhaustion, her mind still reeling from everything that had just transpired. She had no idea how much time had passed. The oppressive silence of the night wrapped around her like a blanket, the hum of the city far off in the distance a reminder that life was continuing, indifferent to the chaos she had just narrowly escaped. Her phone was dead, but the weight of the flash drive in her pocket still felt like a lifeline. The evidence was out there. It was in the hands of people who could expose everything, the corruption, the conspiracy, the lies that had pulled so many people into this tangled web. It was over. Or was it? The sound of footsteps echoed down the alley, and Jessica froze, her heart leaping into her throat. But it was only Sarah. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale, but there was something in the way she stood that made Jessica hesitate. Sarah was alive, and the fact that she was here after everything that had happened meant something. "Jessica," Sarah's voice cracked, the word filled with an exhaustion that matched Jessica's own. "I didn't know what else to do. I thought I was protecting you, but I should have told you the truth sooner. We can't just walk away from this. It's too late. But we have to be careful now." Jessica stared at her, the weight of the betrayal still hanging heavily in the air. The last time she had seen Sarah, the trust between them had shattered into 1,000 pieces. But now, standing here, with the knowledge that they had both fought to survive, there was something unspoken between them. A fragile understanding that no matter how broken they were, they had both been on the same side in the end. Jessica took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as the tension eased from her shoulders. "I don't know how we fix this, Sarah. I don't know if we can. But we can't stop now. Not after everything." Sarah nodded, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "We won't stop. Not until the truth is out. Not until we make sure they can't do this to anyone else." But as they turned to leave, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The danger wasn't over. The files might be out in the open, but the people who had orchestrated this conspiracy were far too powerful to simply disappear. They would come for her. For Sarah. For anyone who had dared to stand in their way. But in that moment, as they walked into the cold night, Jessica found a semblance of peace. The truth had a way of finding its way into the light, no matter how hard those in power tried to suppress it. Weeks later, Jessica watched as the story of the conspiracy broke wide open. It didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't easy. The media was reluctant to report on it at first, too many people with too much to lose. But slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Names were named. Connections were exposed. And the world began to wake up to the depth of the corruption that had been allowed to fester in the shadows for so long. But it wasn't a clean victory. The battle had taken a toll. Jessica's life would never be the same, and Sarah had vanished. No one knew where she had gone or whether she had made it out safely. There were still whispers of powerful figures working behind the scenes, still murmurings of threats and warnings that had reached even the most untouchable members of the media. The fight wasn't over. It never truly was. But Jessica had done what she set out to do. She had found the truth. She had exposed it. And while she knew that the people behind the conspiracy would never stop, she had made sure they couldn't keep it hidden anymore. For the first time in months, as she sat alone in her apartment, watching the sun rise through her window, Jessica felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. She had faced the darkness, the lies, the manipulations, and come out the other side. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairytale ending she had once hoped for. But it was enough. The story of what happened, what she had uncovered, had reverberated through the world in ways she hadn't imagined. People began to question things they hadn't questioned before. The system, the powers that be, the structures that had always felt untouchable, were they as invincible as they once seemed? Or had the cracks started to show, just enough for others to notice? Jessica wasn't sure. But she knew one thing for certain: there were always more stories to uncover. More lies to expose. The darkness didn't disappear because she had shone a light on it. It just went into hiding, waiting for someone else to come along and unearth it once again. And as she sat there, her phone buzzing with messages from old contacts, whispers of new leads, Jessica knew she couldn't stop now. Not with so much left to be done. And then, the final twist, just as Jessica was about to close her eyes and rest, a message popped up on her phone. It was an encrypted email, a string of numbers she didn't recognize at first, but then she deciphered it. It was a name, an address, and a warning: you're not the only one who's been watching. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The end. Or was it?